The wind over Dustfall Ridge howled like a wounded animal, carrying with it the dry breath of the desert and the scent of blood and rain long gone. Silas Kane rode through it with his hat pulled low and his eyes narrowed against the sun that dipped toward the west, burning red as if the sky itself had been shot. He had been alone for 3 years, ever since the war and the gang and the betrayal that turned his name from legend to curse, and the only thing that kept him moving was the memory of a promise he'd never had the chance to keep. The land was cruel out here. Men killed for water, died for gold, and prayed for forgiveness they didn't deserve. Silas wasn't much for praying anymore. He was heading back to Hollow Creek, the town that had once been home before he became the man the posters called Kane the Outlaw. He meant to sell his horse, drink what whiskey he could afford, and disappear into the next stretch of nowhere. But fate, as always, had a way of laughing at plans made by broken men. He found her near the old railroad bend, lying half buried under sand and gravel, her dress torn and her face streaked with dirt and blood. At first, he thought she was dead. He'd seen plenty of bodies left for the buzzards and thought one more would make no difference to the world or him. But when he knelt beside her and brushed the dust from her cheek, her lips parted and the faintest whisper escaped, so fragile it almost vanished with the wind. "Don't leave me here." That voice, it didn't sound like a stranger's plea. It sounded like something that belonged to his past, to all the things he'd lost. Her eyes flickered open, deep green and wild with pain, and for a heartbeat he forgot to breathe. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not her, not Maren Leigh. The girl from Hollow Creek who used to patch up his busted knuckles after fights and steal his cigarettes just to see him chase her through the cornfields. The one who used to say he'd never die easy because the world wouldn't let men like him rest. And now here she was, broken and bloodied, her ribs crushed beneath what looked like the wreck of a wagon ambushed on the trail. "Silas," she croaked, her voice trembling like glass about to shatter. "You ain't real. You can't be real." He felt something twist hard inside him, the part of his heart he'd buried deep beneath the dust. "You're real enough to make a fool out of me," he muttered, scooping her up as gently as he could, though she winced with every breath. "My ribs," she gasped, clutching his shirt weakly. "Already broken." He froze, his jaw tightening. "Then I'll carry the rest of your pain." The wind roared around them, but his words held still in the air, a vow heavier than the desert itself. He carried her to his horse, wrapped her in his coat, and rode toward Hollow Creek, toward the ghosts he'd sworn never to face again. The ride was long and cruel. She slipped in and out of consciousness, whispering fragments of names and nightmares, while Silas tried not to think about the bounty on his head or the men who might still be hunting him. When they reached the outskirts of town, the lights of the saloon flickered like mirages through the dust, and the familiar sound of a piano drifted faintly through the wind. Hollow Creek hadn't changed. It still smelled like gunpowder and cheap whiskey, still whispered of sins people were too tired to confess. He dismounted behind the old livery stable, cradling her close as he searched for help. But help was a rare thing in Hollow Creek, especially for a man like him. He found the old doctor, a weary man named Harlan Briggs, who owed Silas a debt from years past when Kane had dragged him out of a poker den before a bullet did. Briggs stared in disbelief when he saw who stood at his door. "Silas Kane," he muttered. "I thought the gallows took you years ago." "Guess death lost its grip," Silas said. "She's hurt bad, Doc. I need you to fix her up." The doctor hesitated only a moment before pulling him inside, his hands already moving for bandages and morphine. As the night deepened, Silas sat beside Maren's bed, watching her breathe shallow and slow, her face pale beneath the flickering lamplight. He thought about all the times he'd dreamed of her voice when he was running from sheriffs and memories, how he used to imagine her singing by the river where they'd carved their initials into the rock. He'd left her behind once, thinking it would save her from his darkness. Now she'd found her way back into it. When dawn broke, she stirred, her eyes opening weakly to the sound of his boots on the creaking floor. "Why are you here?" she whispered, her lips trembling. "You should have kept riding, Silas. They'll hang you if they find you." He knelt beside her, his voice low and steady. Let try. I ain't leaving you again. She tried to smile but the pain stole it away. You always were stubborn. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. You always said that's what you loved about me. Her eyes softened with tears that didn't fall. I did. Maybe I still do. But you shouldn't have come back. He leaned closer, the shadow of the past in his eyes. You were the only thing worth coming back for. Outside, the sun climbed over the hills, painting the desert gold, and Hollow Creek woke with its usual lies and whispers. But in that small, dim room, two broken souls faced the truth neither could escape. Silas didn't know who'd done this to her yet, but he swore before the morning light that he'd find out. And when he did, the desert would remember his name again. The morning after Maren awoke, the wind carried a whisper through Hollow Creek, a whisper that the outlaw Silas Kane had returned from the dead. In every saloon corner, over every poker table, men spat out the same words like curses wrapped in whiskey. He's back, and hell's coming with him. But Silas wasn't thinking of hell. He was thinking of the fragile rise and fall of Maren's chest as she slept, her ribs bound and her breath shallow, her face ghost pale beneath the lamplight. Dr. Briggs said she'd live, if she stayed quiet, if she didn't break herself trying to speak of the past. But Silas needed to know. Someone had done this to her, someone who'd thought she'd die on that trail, and he couldn't rest until he found them. When she woke again that evening, her voice was a rasp of wind over broken glass. Silas, she said softly, you can't stay. They'll hang you before sundown if they catch you here. He sat beside her, his revolver on the table and his eyes dark with promise. Then I'll make sure they never get the chance. She reached for his hand, her touch trembling. This isn't the man I remember. He looked at her, the weight of years and regret heavy in his silence. You remember a man who thought the world could be fixed. That man died out there, somewhere between the war and the whiskey. What's left just keeps its word. Her eyes glistened with something between fear and love. And what word is that? He squeezed her hand gently. To protect you, no matter what it costs. That night, while Hollow Creek slept under a blood-orange moon, Silas walked into the saloon where the piano never stopped playing. The floorboards groaned under boots and secrets, and the smell of smoke and sweat choked the air. Men looked up when he entered, the kind of men who measured strangers by how quick they reached for the guns. Silas didn't flinch. He went straight to the bar and ordered whiskey. On the house, the barkeep muttered nervously. Everyone knew that look. The calm before the killing. I'm looking for the one they call Crowley, Silas said, his voice low and cold. The barkeep hesitated, eyes darting toward a table in the back where a man sat in a black coat, a scar running from his temple to his jaw. Crowley. The name alone stank of gunpowder and greed. He'd once ridden with Silas, a brother in blood and crime, until he sold them all out to the law and left Silas to hang. It made sense now. If Maren had been left broken on that road, Crowley's hand was in it. Silas crossed the room slowly, every eye watching, every card game frozen mid-hand. You left her for dead, he said quietly, stopping at Crowley's table. The man looked up, smiling thinly. Should have known she'd crawl back to you. Guess some ghosts don't know when to quit. The world went still. Then, faster than breath, both men drew. The gunfire shattered the silence. 1, 2, 3 shots that echoed off the walls like thunder in a canyon. When the smoke cleared, Crowley lay slumped across the table, his blood soaking the whiskey glass he'd never finished. Silas stood, chest rising and falling slow, a single bullet wound grazing his arm. That was for her, he said softly. No one stopped him when he walked out. Even the piano went silent. Back at the doctor's house, Maren woke to the sound of boots on the porch and saw him framed in the doorway, shadows cutting across his face. It's done, he said. Crowley won't hurt you again. Tears welled in her eyes as she struggled to sit. You shouldn't have done that, Silas. They'll come for you. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that broke your heart because it knew the end was close. Let 'em come. I've been running from the hangman long enough. She reached out,